There's no guarantee that in 5 years, Google won't be the only search engine, the only reasonable alternative. There's no reason to think that in 5 years, Google won't essentially be the equivalent of the web itself.
This company has made you fabulously wealthy, hasn't it?
We've been, as a company, obviously more lucky than any company deserves to be.
Most successful company in the history of the world. I think that's true.
The Google Internet Search Engine. If you used it to find a Google expert, you might come up with this man, author John Battelle.
You've studied the company for so long. Give us a sense of what Google is, how successful a phenomenon it is. How would you characterize it?
Most successful company in the history of the world. I think that's fair.
The most successful company in the world.
I think that's true. I think it's inarguable. Now, if you look at past histories, Microsoft, I think, rivals Google for a period of time, right? From the late 80s through the mid-90s, its growth was quite similar. I do not believe it had the same profit curve, though. The profits that Google has managed to create are extraordinary.
In 2008, Google earned more than $4 billion in profits, with more than 95% of that coming from advertising, tied to its search engine. What makes it so good? In simple terms, a basic search engine crawls the internet, bouncing from link to link, indexing as many web pages as it can. When you do a search, it stacks your results based on the number of times your search term appears in each site. Google's masterstroke was to rank every website's importance by counting the number of other websites linking back to it. Google figured the more links to a site, the more important it must be, and the higher it should show up in your search results. They called this approach PageRank, after Larry Page, and it worked brilliantly.
I'm sure you remember, as do I, being told, hey, you've got to check this out. And when you go there and use it for the first time, it just works, and something happens between your ears that makes that brand valuable to you instantly, because a service is delivered that is delightful.
In the small, sun-baked town of Nogales, Arizona, just a stone's throw from the U.S.-Mexico border, we found an unlikely marriage of old-world craftsmanship and high-tech salesmanship.
The cowboys that wear our boots like to buy the toughest boot we can possibly make, so we delight in making the toughest cowboy boot that we can.
Cowboy boots don't get any tougher than this. And cowboy boot makers don't get any better than Paul Bond.
All right.
At 93, you can still find him every day in his workshop, sketching original designs.
Okay, that'll give him a little design around the top.
And hand-fitting the wooden forms he makes for each customer's feet.
We can shape his toes down to it, and the arch is just the right length.
The result is some of the most exquisite, durable, and expensive cowboy boots available anywhere. From $500 and up, depending on the design and leather.
What's the best skin?
Oh, really, one of the best is just a good old heavyweight calf skin. There's a heavyweight calf skin right there.
For decades, Bond Boot relied mostly on word of mouth, including some very famous mouths. But recently, this old-school craftsman took a gigantic step forward and planted his hand-cut boot firmly in the 21st century. Bond Boot began to advertise on Google.
You're handling it good.
George Bond is Paul's son and business partner.
Did you know much about Google before approaching?
Only as a search engine. I used it a lot. It actually was my favorite search engine. But nothing about AdWords, nothing about the advertising. I had no idea how it all worked.
Google's advertising program is called AdWords. It's a simple name, but its effect has been seismic, and not just for small advertisers like Paul Bond Boot. AdWords is one of the most revolutionary developments in the media world since television itself. Author John Battelle.
AdWords made the company. The company would be an interesting side note as there have been so many in search. Dozens, if not scores or hundreds, of really interesting search services have come and gone, or still exist, but no one knows about them. But AdWords is what made Google Google.
So AdWords is the magic?
Absolutely.
AdWords may be the most successful and profitable business program you've never heard of. It generates more than 95% of Google's total profits, $4 billion in 2008. If you ever wondered how Google makes its money, AdWords is it.
It is very pure. It is a pure profit machine. I have a thesis, which is that they have more profits in that company than the entire media business. You know, in the 10 years that the company's been profitable or so. It's staggering.
AdWords is what generates the ads or sponsored links you see on a Google results page. If you Google custom or handmade cowboy boots,
there you are.
Yeah.
The Paul Bond boot ad often shows up there. Those are called impressions, and they don't cost Bond Boot anything. They only have to pay Google when someone actually clicks on their link and goes to their website. It's called pay-per-click. How well does it work? When Bond Boot launched their campaign, orders instantly spiked, more than 20%. And they've only gone up since.
How good of a program is Google AdWords for small businesses like yours?
In my opinion, it would be indispensable at a time like this. You can hit the people who are actually looking for the product. Mm-hmm. And in a product such as this, that's a relatively small number of people, but they do know what they're looking for if you'll just help them get there.
Most advertisers want their ads to show up as high on the page as possible. Here's how they get there. Let's say Paul Bond Boot wants its ad to appear when someone does a search for ostrich boots. Maybe Bond Boot is willing to pay $1 for every click on their link. So that's what they bid on those keywords. But there's more to it than price. Google's algorithm also gives a quality score to each advertiser's website.
You can't buy your way to the top if your ad isn't relevant.
David Fisher is Google's vice president for global online sales.
An advertiser who chooses the right set of keywords and shows really relevant ads can actually appear right at the top and actually be paying less than some of the advertisers who appear below them because their ad is so relevant. Our system actually rewards that. There he is. He shows up in the top slot.
And that's what happens with Paul Bond Boot. They may have a modest ad budget, but Google often pushes them to the top because of the quality of their website.
What AdWords does is it creates a level playing field for everyone from the smallest mom-and-pop business up to the largest Fortune 500 company and lets them compete alongside each other.
Advertisers can also adjust their campaigns down to the pennies they spend, the minutes they advertise, and the zip codes where they show.
You actually are presented with a map and all kinds of ways of determining where you want to advertise. In the moment, I have it primarily set by country because we're trying to control budget.
This is very addictive because it enables you to watch all of the activities of your customer.
You are exactly right.
It's a constant scorecard.
It becomes kind of a game that you're playing.
Like most AdWords users, George Bond manages the advertising himself, and it's obviously working. Maybe too well. Sometimes he literally has to shut it off.
Google could overwhelm us quickly.
How will Google overwhelm?
Given the indicated figures, it could double the number of orders coming in. There is far more out there available to us if we decide to extend the budget further. There's a lot more out there.
Right now, the Bonds have a 4-month waiting list for new custom boots.
Your boots will be there in about 3 days. How about that?
That looks good.
Paul Bond couldn't have imagined Google when he started making cowboy boots back in the early 30s. But not even this tiny shop in an Arizona border town is beyond the reach of the Internet's most powerful presence.